Welcome to the Men of Action podcast, where we bring on Southern men who originally felt like a zero until they recognized they had a hero inside them to take on that call of responsibility, ownerships. And today, I got a special guest. Today, we got Kyle Cummings in the house. Kyle, how you doing today?
What's up, man? How are you doing? Good to see you,
Uh,
brother.
Doing well. It's always a pleasure to see you, especially after we had our Connect call a little while back. And it's good
Yes,
to see
sir.
you again.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I think it's brave that you're coming on your first podcast, showing your beautiful face, and just ready to take some action today.
Yes, sir, man. I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, Kyle, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
All right. So I am 48 years old. I am a husband and father. So my wife and I have been married for 20 years now. So in November, we celebrated 20 years. I've got three kids. My oldest is 25. I've got a 25-year-old son, a 19-year-old son, and a 17-year-old daughter getting ready to start her last year of high school. So we are on the road to empty nesting, man.
Oh, how's that gotta feel? All the kids almost getting out of the house.
What's that?
I said, how's that feel knowing you got one more kid before you fully kick them out of the nest?
Oh, it's good, man, but it goes by quick. So not looking forward. My youngest is my daughter, so she's the baby girl, and that one's going to be a tough one on me, but she's off to do bigger and better things. So looking forward to it for her. So, and
Sure.
I'm also a Marine vet. And I just retired from 20 years in the medical sales industry. So I'm kind of in between gigs right now, kind of trying to figure out what God has for me next. But I knew it wasn't that anymore. So,
Well, of course, thank you for your service in the military. Just thank you for taking on the call of action. Truly, one of the highest honors and biggest calls of actions you could do.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
So always got to give that honor where it's due, especially with people who go and do that sacrifice to again take on that call and to do something incredibly noble.
Yes, sir. Yeah, my dad was in the army, Vietnam vet. We'll get to him. But I just kind of felt the call, was really kind of wasting my time after high school. Wasn't a very good student in high school, didn't really have any guidance or direction, so felt like the thing to do, and I'm glad I did, man. It was an honor serving the country, so.
No, that's awesome. So, in this podcast, we really discuss how men who originally weren't taking action in their life have learned to take action, then take that step above, and now trying to help other men. So,
Yes,
what is
sir.
kind of the trial that you kind of went through to when you realized that you need to take some more action in your life?
Yeah, so, uh, man, pretty much from the beginning of my life was a trial. So,
Okay.
uh, I listened to one of your podcasts with Nate Norman, which I'm doing a 90-day challenge. It's called SRX 90 with Nate and Mike Schiff. They're the leaders.
Mhm.
There's about 20 guys doing it, and something really stuck out to me in the beginning of that podcast with him. He talks about the gray man,
Yeah.
just the lifeless, purposeless, directionless guy. So that was my dad, and he was, Nate used an example of a Vietnam vet when they come back from war, and just kind of that 1,000-yard stare and just kind of blank and empty. That was my dad. He was a Vietnam vet and very angry, just very empty, very purposeless, very no direction. And also, he was an adulterer and addicted most of my life. He was addicted to pornography. And
Hmm.
so I was born into that. My mother was abandoned by her dad when she was 5, and
Wow.
found out that he pretty much had like a whole other family, and he was just going back and forth for a while until he just disappeared. So that in the beginning, I mean, that just created issues from the beginning. Not
Sure.
really sure that my mom ever wanted kids. She definitely didn't want a boy, she wanted a girl. So that kind of
Did
just
that against you too, growing up in this, family trouble and then, difficulties in life. And then on top of that,
yeah.
no, I'm doing. Oh my god.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal, man. And I'm an only child, so there was nobody else to take anything out on but me. So both of my parents were pretty I guess you could say disappointed with life. Very
Mm-hmm.
negative vibe. Uh, and violence. There was a lot of violence, a lot of anger issues in the house. So that's kind of how my life started, man. Just being isolated, being alone with them all the time. I remember when I was young, I would get in trouble for everything, like every little thing. And their big thing was to just lock me in my room. So I was stuck in my room a lot. We'd be like in the middle of a baseball game out in the front yard, and my parents would just, for whatever reason, just like, get in the house, get in your room. And I'd be just sitting on my bed, staring out the window, watching all my friends play, until it's
Oh my
dark.
God.
And yeah, it was brutal. So, those hardships just started very early on in life. And then when I was about, it was probably, so I've had to dig back through counseling and stuff and kind of figure out where all this stuff came from in my life that led me to where I was
Mm-hmm.
before I got set free. But around fourth grade, things started really shifting for me. So I was sexually abused by an older neighborhood kid, and he was a big kid, a lot bigger than me. I was pretty small back in the day. I'm not anymore. But growing up until a certain age, I was always one of the smaller kids and just an easy target for bullies and people to pick on. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that happened to me. It happened on 3 different occasions. And then around about the same time, between, this is all like between 10 years old and 12 years old, I
Okay.
found my dad's VHS porn collection.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And so, man, when they were gone, and I mean, obviously at that age, I didn't even know what sex was. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything, sexuality, nothing. But curiosity, I found these tapes. I'm like, I'm going to go stick this in the VCR and see what it is. And it's hardcore porn. And I got into watching that stuff for hours upon hours. Every time my parents were gone from the house, that's what I did. I just kind of, I was always alone anyway, always just kind of stuck inside and watching TV. So I'm like, I became addicted to that at such an early age before I even knew what anything was. So that really set my life on a course that was just really uncontrollable from the beginning. And uh probably, I think it was in 7th grade. So in 7th grade, I had to start. So for 3 years, all that went on. Um, and then in 7th grade, I had to ride the bus to school from my neighborhood. We had a little corner stop where the bus picked us up and took
Right.
us to school. And then I started getting bullied by a kid that was like a full grown dude. He was a man by the time he was in 7th grade. He was probably
Hmm.
5'9". I don't know how tall he
Right.
was. To me, he was a full grown man.
Well, of
And
course, especially if you're like a foot shorter or something like that, and you see something like that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, he every single day he would just humiliate me on the bus. And I mean, he just tormented me every single day of that year. And the same year, so it was a rough year all the way around that
Yeah.
year in 7th grade. So that really started kind of the whole downfall with like grades and checking out of school and getting in trouble and all that type of stuff. I met a little girl, and I was just as happy as could be. Like, that was like a break for me, like away from my parents, away from him. I would just go in my room. I'd talk on the phone with her for all hours. Uh, and then my parents found out about her and made me
Oh,
break up with her because my parents were also racist. That's a hard thing to say. But man, and she wasn't the type that they would want me to date, and they made me break up with her. So I got super angry. And at the end of my 7th grade year, I ended up throwing a book at a teacher because I so bad wanted to find a way to escape my reality that I was like, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to find a way to get booted out of this school so I can get away from this bully, get away from the girl that my parents forced me to break up with, and just like out of sight, out of mind type of thing, I guess. I mean, I guess that's what was going through my 12 or 13-year-old brain at the time. But yeah, man. So I ended up doing that and getting kicked out of public school, um, transferred to a private school, and another bully. So it just seemed like for a few years from 7th through ninth grade, I couldn't get away from it. And just all this stuff started compiling one on top of the other with the pornography, the
Mhm.
getting beat at home. So anytime I got in trouble anywhere at school or where, no matter where it was in the neighborhood, whatever it was, I would come home and get beat for that too. So anytime I got in trouble at school, it was like double at home, and not pretty like just I'm going to give you a couple of licks or whatever. It was like truly child abuse.
Yeah, no, I mean, anytime you leave a mark or anything like that, I mean, did anyone in the school like see any bruising or anything? Or
No, man, that's what's so crazy. Like my wife works in the schools now. She's a secretary at the high school here in town, and she has such an impact with troubled kids. You know, she just sees the signs in them, and maybe just because she's been married to me for 20 years, I'm not sure. She comes from a life full of trauma too, so
yeah,
she's just really good at identifying that stuff and like reaching out to those kids, like, "Hey, what's going on, man? You know, you've been missing school, you've been coming in late, you've been getting in trouble." Like, she just slows them down and talks to them. And I so wish back in the day that I would have had an adult do that for me. But no, I mean, there was nothing. I mean, and every time I would bring stuff up to my parents, I mean, I threatened them a million times. I'm going to call CPS on you. At one point, I think I was in probably eighth or ninth grade. I wanted to do something, and I got in a fight with my parents about it. And my dad got violent with me, and I pulled a gun on him. Like,
cool.
I mean, it was just crazy, man. My whole life was just stuff like that, just one thing after another. Uh, until I got into alcohol. So my sophomore year, I ended up going back to a public school and ended up getting drunk for the first time. So I was 15, almost 16 years old, at a party right before school started with the kid. He actually took me to the party, the kid that had sexually abused me years earlier.
Oh my god.
So yeah, man, the first time I drank alcohol, I drank beer with him and his
Yeah.
buddies, and it just seems like that just kind of set my world on fire.
Did the kid do anything to you since he took you to the party? I mean, and you were with your abuser.
No, it's like it was never spoken of again, you know? It's weird.
So
He was
what
a
was the
kid that
unspoken
always, I
rules
think
that
he
you're
was
not
like a
gonna
big.
talk about anything or
What's
that
that?
so it was like one of those like unspoken rules, like nothing happened, we're not gonna talk about anything, we're just gonna go to this party and
Yeah, pretty much.
get
I
drunk?
mean, I had always looked up to the guy. He was a bigger kid, athlete, played football and baseball and all that stuff. And
Okay.
he was always somebody I looked up to regardless. I really didn't realize until much later in life that even happened in the first place. Like, I had put it out of my mind. So my sophomore year, I had no idea. I wasn't thinking about that when I went to the party with him. I was just like, "Hey man, this kid is inviting me to a party. I'm going to go." I just,
Okay.
wanted to be cool, wanted to go hang out with the cool kids. And so I went to this party, and that started my drinking. So that went on for many years of my life. So started in 15, and by 17, man, I was a raging alcoholic. Um, it was a very strange deal because at that point, my parents just gave up. I think like the punishment was over. By the time I don't remember what age my dad last put a hand on me, but at some point it just ended. It was so weird. It was like this strict, every infraction you get beat for my whole life, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. And then I would come home wasted. I mean, I was 17 years old coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning. My parents wouldn't even ask me where I was at. And
Whoa.
like park my truck in the front yard, park my truck in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
I don't know how I survived, man. It's a miracle. God is the only reason I survived 100%. But
Yeah,
yeah, so
definitely.
that was it, man. Through high school, I started working at nightclubs. I was a bouncer at a nightclub because I loved to fight. Like I mentioned, I was pretty small. Well, my
Yeah,
sophomore
I got
year,
you.
what's that?
I said, I know it's kinda to be a bouncer, you gotta be a big dude.
Yeah, so my sophomore year, I probably went in about 5'9", I don't even know, 150 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, I was 6'2", like 210. I
Oh
mean, hit
wow,
a
you
massive
gained,
growth spurt my
yeah, you got
sophomore year.
massive.
And when that happened, I made a vow like no one's ever messing with me again. And I kind of just became a fighter, man. I just took it to people. If I mean, for anything, if I felt threatened in the least bit, I would fight.
Wow.
So I kind of created this macho bravado. I really wasn't, I was really just a broken, sad, lonely, depressed, anxious little kid
Yeah,
that didn't know what to do with all these things that had happened to me in my life, didn't know what to do with the emotions, didn't know what to do with the rejection, any of that stuff. So I just kind of created like a persona, a bravado, or whatever you want to call it. So
right.
I became the fighter. I mean, that's what I was known as. And that led me into the Marine Corps. So yeah, man, I was doing nothing. I was just partying and hanging out and every day just wasting my life away. I went to junior college for like maybe half a semester and ended up
Mhm.
dropping out and just joined the Marines and thought that would get my life on track, and everything just quadrupled in the Marine Corps.
Oh jeez.
I don't know how much you know about the Marines, but it's pretty high
I
rate of
just
alcohol.
one of the toughest bunch and the first to go in.
It is, and they treat you like it, man. I mean, that's their sole job from the first day of boot camp is to break you down and
Yeah.
tear everything about you down to the ground, which I was pretty torn to the ground in the first place. So it helped me from a discipline standpoint, but everything else to deal with the stress and anxiety and all that stuff that my life already was. And then you add all the Marine Corps stuff on top of it. I was a freaking mess, dude.
Oh
I mean,
geez.
every chance I got, I was wasted. And we're talking like blackout drunk, like crazy stuff. Like one of
How'd
the
you
funniest
survive that
stories.
with the military being so with the Marines being so strict? How'd you survive with getting blackout drunk whenever you had the opportunity, let's say, especially with how early mornings and drills upon drills, and I know a few people who had a few problems like with drinking in the military, even had a few people would step in and say, "We gotta get this under control."
Yeah. So my platoon was pretty rough. Like everybody was pretty crazy.
Okay.
Everybody was an alcoholic. It really wasn't an issue. I mean, you would think
Oh,
it would be,
yeah.
but we kind of did whatever we wanted. I mean, and we were out training a lot, out in the field a lot. So when we went out, we tied it on, man. So I think my first 2 years we stayed out in the field Monday through Thursday, and we would come back Thursday evening, put our weapons in the armory, and then go sleep. And then Friday morning, we would clean our weapons and be off until Monday morning. So
Oh,
that gave us a few days every week to go party. And that's what we did, man. We just went nuts. We go to Tijuana a lot. I mean, we went on weekdays too when we weren't out in the field, which is insane. I remember a few times going out, getting back at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we had 5:30 formation and a 3 or 6 mile run. I mean, it was nuts. I'm not really
man.
sure how any of us survived it, but we did.
I guess being young and just body gets used to doing it, I guess. I
Yeah,
don't
I guess so,
have any
man. It
idea
would
how you
kill
were
me
doing
now.
that, honestly.
It would destroy me now, man. I couldn't drink 2 beers now, but anyway, so yeah, that all went on. I ended up getting married in the Marines, which the famous saying in the Marines is if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, they would issue you one. And there's not a truer statement in the world. The divorce rate in the Marines is probably 98%. I mean, it's crazy because you're
Okay.
just gone all the time. You never know
Yeah.
when you're going to leave. They could just be like, hey, go home, pack your crap, get back in 2 hours. We're leaving. We're going to be gone for a month. And it was
Yeah.
like that a lot. So it was not conducive to marriage. Nevertheless, I ended up getting her pregnant. I know exactly the day that it was. It was one day before I left on deployment. And so found out while I was on deployment that she
Right.
was pregnant through a letter that probably took 4 months to get to me in the Gulf somewhere. So then I had that to contend with. Not only was the Marines hard, but now I got a wife that we weren't even getting along. It was crazy. It was like, this is going to be, in my mind, this last time was going to be our last hurrah. I was shipping her back home and I was
Yeah.
done with her.
Oh,
But
geez.
I found out that, I had a kid, so I man, that's a whole other story. But anyway, she wanted to have an abortion and I
Okay.
refused. I wouldn't do it, man. That's just I don't know where that came from in me, but that's just one thing that I was like, that can't happen. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm not that person. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to be a part of that. So we had him and we raised him. He's 25 and doing good now, but man, it was a challenge for a lot of years. So,
Of
uh,
course.
getting out of the Marines, I pretty much was that gray man. And then I became my dad. I was a gray, angry man that was an alcoholic. I really didn't have a porn addiction. It was strange. Like I did all that stuff when I was younger, but
Mhm.
really didn't do much of it really any other part of my life. I mean, it's not like I never viewed it again, but
Sure.
I never had an addiction to it. I think I just
Was like you sit in front of the TV or a laptop for like hours upon hours.
what's that?
So it wasn't like you're on like a TV or a laptop
Right.
for hours and hours like you were when you were a kid.
Yeah, just really. I mean, at some point, I guess my dad threw all his stuff away, really never had access to it again, and didn't really think about it much
Okay.
anymore. I mean, it was around in the military, obviously, all the time, but just
Yeah.
never really had I just didn't care about it. I think that's just something that caught me at an early age when I was going through a lot. And for whatever reason, that became a comfort to me. And it was a very strange deal. But anyway, uh, so I get out of the Marines, not happy with my wife, have a kid, life is a wreck, looking at, minimum wage jobs because I didn't have any skills. I was in the infantry, so it's not like you do a whole lot, I mean, you train to kill people. You don't I didn't do nothing with computers or technology
Okay.
or engineering. I mean, nothing that was translatable to the real world. So
Got it.
I pretty much just I was going to be a firefighter, so I took the firefighter academy test, and with the
Mhm.
veterans preference choice points, I was number 1 in the recruiting class and
Wow.
ended up getting the DWI.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah, man, that derailed that. So it was just like one thing after another throughout my whole life. So ended up in school after that and got a marketing business degree. And one of my cousins is in medical sales, and I went to his wedding, and him and all his friends looked like they had pretty good lives, and I was like, man, I'm going to do that, not knowing, is that really my personality? Do I have a purpose for that? I
Right.
wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. I was like, man, I got
How can I make money
responsibilities
just to feed
now.
my family and to keep a roof over my head?
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of just was forced into doing whatever I had to do to make things work at the time.
Mhm.
And shortly after that all transpired, I ended up getting divorced. So we split up and I moved out shortly. I don't know how long it was after I moved out. Anyway, met my wife now of 20 years, and she's a blessing from God. She's a godly woman. She has been following God since she was 8 years old, saved when she was 8, and she is like every word that comes out of her mouth is Jesus. What would Jesus do? I mean, that's all. My kids will come to her and ask her questions, and
Yeah.
never mind, mom, I already know what you're gonna say. She's just been that way, man. And her only vice in her life ever was smoking cigarettes. So we met
Oh.
at a job where my manager, so she was living in a different town and coming in on the weekends to the
Mhm.
town I lived in to help this church from her town plant a new church in my town. And the pastor's nephew was my boss. So the pastor's nephew hired her to work where I was working at a retail. I was in retail sales at the time, trying to get sales experience to go into medical sales.
Mhm.
And she started there, and that's how we met. So we just became friends, and we would sit out in my truck. She would meet me at work early, and we would sit out in my truck and smoke cigarettes and just talk about life, man. And I had so many breakthroughs with her that, like, I started seeing things about trauma and what was going on in my head, and that she had kind of lived the same thing. So we just had a lot of stuff in common. We both just came from crappy families and had a lot of generational curses and stuff like
Mm.
that. And so she reintroduced me back to church and back to God. And so I got saved, I rededicated my life to God, started going to church with her. But I just never really shook off all the stuff that had happened to me, because I feel like I lived dissociated so long.
Mhm.
Um, I don't even know when that started and when it stopped. It's a weird deal, man. Like almost like out of body experiences a lot. Like almost like living your whole existence in an out of body experience. The only other way I know how to describe it is like even when I was in bars and all that stuff back in the day, like I felt like I was a social person. I really wasn't. I was really a trauma filled person that was just trying to drink away my
Right.
anxieties and pain and depression and all that stuff. So, but I always wanted to be around people. I hated being alone, probably because I'm an only child. And when I was alone, not good stuff happened. So I just always wanted to be around action and be around people. And
Yeah.
I would go to bars all the time. I mean, I spent half my life in bars at this point, but I was always there in the midst of people, but I never felt like I was in the midst of people. It was like I had a glass like container around me, or like glass wall, and it was like I could see everything going on. I could see all these people laughing and having
Mhm.
fun, and I was just miserable, man.
Oh, sure.
I was there, I was partaking, but I wasn't really there, if that makes sense.
No, it
So
makes a lot of sense. Like you're part of the crowd, but you're not part of the crowd.
yeah, 100%.
And it's just one of those things that you see people who struggle with, like being around people. Like you want to be a part of a group so bad, like you'll do whatever it takes to be part of that group. But there's this barrier from you developing like an emotional connection to the group.
Man, 100%. I've never heard
So
it that way, but that's it. Probably
yeah.
your background, you could tell me more.
A little
We'll
bit,
have to
yeah.
talk
Kinda
offline.
kinda kinda helps having a good background in that kinda stuff
I
when you
need
work with
some
a lot of
I need you
people
to
with
psychoanalyze me, man. But yeah, dude, I mean, community is what I was missing for so long. And
yeah.
like that the band of brothers from the Marine Corps, like when I got out, it was just gone. It's like one
Yeah.
day you're surrounded by 70 dudes all the time. And then it's just like your day comes, you're out. I'm back home. I'm back to being the only child. All my friends were gone.
Yeah.
And none of them would really hang out with me anymore anyway, because I was so crazy like through high school and after high school before I actually went to the Marines,
Sure.
that, you know, all their girlfriends and wives and stuff are like, "Oh no, he's back. You ain't hanging out with him."
Well, 'cause
Well, I
it's
had to
hard because someone's, like, last perception of you is when they last saw you.
yeah, true.
So even if you did, let's say, did this huge transformation in the military, got your life, let's say, completely 100% did a 180, their last thought of you is the last time they saw you, especially if they knew you as this crazy kid who threw a book at a teacher and everything else in the works.
Yeah. Oh
So
man, there's a whole lot more of that stuff too. I mean,
oh,
I was just
sure.
a crazy dude. I mean, I was just so messed up in the head. I didn't really have any compass, and
Yeah.
so I was just nuts. But yeah, so I came back and just isolated, alone, not really any kind of group or community, no friends. Didn't When I started going to church with her, I didn't really fit in with the guys at church, and so it's just been this whole journey of I've done it alone for a long time now. I'm starting to break that cycle. Like taking part in this SRX 90 challenge with Nate and Mike is a huge step for me to that's what I'm doing now. So I've been set free from all of this stuff, and now I'm trying to build community. So I found you through I think Nate's
Yeah.
or following Nate, or I found Nate from following you. I'm not really sure which happened first, but man, these guys are top notch, dude. They're so awesome. Uh, Developing friendships at church now, like
Good.
I'm just a totally different mindset than I've ever had, And I think at one point in my life, I probably made a vow, which, vows besides wedding vows are pretty dangerous.
True.
The Bible warns you not to make vows, and I'm pretty sure I made a vow that I was alone in life and I can do this on my own, and
Mhm.
pretty much just felt like I was always going to be alone besides my wife, but a lot of times that's not enough. Like, we have an awesome relationship now. I mean, we've been through it, but I just really haven't had like brothers. I haven't had that kind of community, that the accountability and the stuff that would keep me on track, or connections that, hey man, I'm struggling with this. Hey, go talk to so and so. They've been through that. You know what I mean? So now I feel like that's my calling. Like, I've been through a lot. I've got a lot to my story of trauma. I mean, trauma around every single turn, and I have a passion for that. I have a passion for helping vets, like, and vets go through a lot of trauma. They've got a lot of
Oh,
issues out there, and
yeah, I mean, not just mental, you got physical, you got spiritual. I mean, everything. I mean, they've seen the worst of people, and then they have to go through a lot of, whether it's PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder,
yeah,
or they have to go through like the VA, and sometimes it can take a while for them to get medical. I've heard a lot of times. I know the VA does its best it can do, but sometimes there's so many people who just have a lot of physical harm from getting wounded in war, getting wounded in training, or
yeah,
anything above.
yeah. It's rough, man. I'm a disabled vet myself, and
Okay.
it takes time to get care. I feel horrible for especially the older guys. Vietnam vets and older. It's rough, and I think in some sense, everybody that serves in the military kind of feels that loneliness when they get out, and feels that isolation, and feels like they were forgotten, kind of left behind.
Yeah.
I think that's a common struggle for vets. I know in the Marine Corps it is for sure, and combat vets. I'm not a combat vet. I can't even
Right.
imagine how combat vets feel. I was injured in a training
Okay.
accident that jacked up my back, and so I've got 3 levels of my spine fused, both hips replaced.
Ooh.
I've had my right knee scope since I got out. This is all stuff that's gone on for the last few years. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, beat up, but man, this challenge is helping me physically. This last year, I went through a struggle with nerve pain. I don't know what was causing it. Just couldn't hardly get out of bed, man. It was like every other week I'd start to feel good, and then I'd just go
Mhm.
down again, feel good, go down again. And this challenge requires me to do a lot. So we have to work out 45 minutes a day and then take 7,000 steps a day. It's like
Wow.
a it's like a 75 hard, but it's got a community component to it, which a lot of challenges don't. You're out there on your
Sure.
own, no one to lean on, and then a spiritual component, which is huge, man. We're spending an hour a day and an hour of solitude a day with God, and that was
Wow.
really a big thing. My two biggest things were I want to continue to grow spiritually, and I want to develop community. So for me, that's perfect.
So, do you guys meet up like once a week just to review the results of like how the week go, or kind of
We're all
about
connected on Telegram into a chat,
okay.
so we
So you guys
chat
are
back
always
and
having
forth.
some type of communication then.
Yeah, yeah. And then once a week on Friday, we'll do a Zoom call, and that's where we'll talk about a pillar. So it could be a physical challenge, like the first time we had a plank challenge. This
Yeah.
week we have a spiritual challenge, so we're having to either there's a few things you can pick from, like reach out to your pastor, ask him how you can help, just be of assistance to them, or you can lead your family in a Bible study or prayer every night. It's just really cool personal growth stuff that's, rooted in God, which is the most important thing. So it's awesome. But anyway, back to kind of what I had been through. So all of this stuff culminated about 4 years ago when I had to confront my wife. I had to come home and talk to my wife and share with her what I was doing that I shouldn't have been doing. So essentially, I ended up becoming my father's son, and I was unfaithful in my marriage, and had to come home and own up to that. And man, That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It was rough, but just taking accountability, taking ownership. So for years I had gone through like shame cycles, just through addiction. I mean, you get your fix and then you start feeling guilty about it. You start feeling shame about it. And then that kind of wears off a little bit down the road. And it's just like rinse and repeat. Right. And I just did that throughout my whole life with everything. I mean, I did it with starting with cigarettes, then it was alcohol, then it was sex, then it was cocaine. And I mean, pretty much everything you can list. Fortunately for me, I never got hooked on heroin or
That's good.
death. And I was able to get off of everything fairly easily when I, kind of put my mind to it. But
Yeah.
so yeah, that was one of the things that I think stemmed from the sexual abuse and from the pornography at an early age. I mean, you just don't you cannot view pornography and have a healthy view of sex, period. And
Oh, without a doubt. Nope.
that's another part of this challenge that I love, man. The first two pillars, no porn and no masturbation. I mean, that's huge. And I think that's for everybody every day should be
Yeah.
living that way because that stuff is so destructive. And I have no doubt that just those early things that happened to me in life led me down that path. I'm not proud of it, man. It's the most shameful thing in my life, but I can't hold on to it. Like I confronted it at that point, and I have our pastor at church had a very rough life, a lot of trauma,
Oh,
and a lot of the same issues. He didn't have the sexual issues that I had, but he had a lot of the trauma growing up that I had. So he's been able to kind of mentor me through the whole process of just getting through everything that I had to confront and getting back right with God, getting back right with my wife and my family and all
yeah.
that stuff. So, man, it's been awesome. And
It seems
counseling.
like God has put everyone who needed into your life.
What's
Of
that?
what I said, it seems like God has put everyone in your life who needed to be in your life.
Oh, 100%. Especially
Like a
her,
wife
man.
who understands trauma, a pastor that truly understands trauma, not just from like maybe books they read or just people that they worked with, but from personal experience. I mean, that's something that you can't take away.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, yeah. He's so vulnerable. Like he doesn't just tell me this stuff about his life. Yesterday he did a sermon on forgiving. He's been on a forgiveness sermon for a good while now.
Okay.
His last message on his forgiveness was forgiving yourself. And that's like the pivotal thing that helped kind of springboard change in my life was when I finally got through feeling the shame, the remorse, the guilt. Like it happened. I did it. I'm not proud of the man that I was. I'm not proud of who I became, but I owned up to it and I was accountable. I started making changes. And I didn't just start making mental changes. I started making physical changes about 4 years ago with my whole family. So
Mm.
this was like bottom of the barrel thing for me that led to huge blessings that are pouring out into my kids as well. Like we're all in the gym. My kids have joined this challenge with us. My wife is doing this challenge with us.
Oh, it's so
They're not
cool.
doing all the communicating on the side and all
Right.
that good stuff, but they're following all the tenets, man. And it's so awesome. My 19-year-old son is doing it. He's the most pure person in the world. He's never, if an inappropriately dressed girl comes on TV, he's like, it's so awesome to see,
And
when
that's admirable. You don't hear about that too much. No.
yeah, and unfortunately, I can't take a ton of credit for that. He takes after his mama, thank goodness. But man, it's been great, and just a lot of counseling, a lot of digging back into my past, trying to figure out the root cause of all this stuff that happened in my life, and
Mhm.
just getting rid of it, getting free from it. And that's how I got to the point that I know it was around fourth grade, because I remember getting in huge trouble in fourth grade because I made a first C on my report card. My mom is a teacher and she worked at the school that I went to, and she like came down and grabbed me by the ear and dragged me out of class. She was so pissed, man. And I remember, I mean, I look back on that and I was like, that's the time frame. That's when that's when the anger started. That's
Mm.
when the lashing out at people started. That's when my grades started dropping. And so I just kind of started putting these puzzle pieces together and started one thing at a time, started getting free, man. Rededicated my life to God and just dude, for the last few years, everything has been awesome. I mean,
Sure. Well,
20
that's what
years of my life recently. What's that?
so. Well, that's what happens when one person starts to take a little bit of ownership, accountability, and action to life. And I love the key word you just said: started one thing at a time and a little bit at a time. That's what's key. What were you gonna say?
Uh, I don't remember. Yeah, the one thing at a time. And I think I don't. I'm sure it's probably God. Like He brought things to my memory a little at a time
Yeah.
because there's no way that I could have handled 20 plus years, 30 plus years of trauma
Right.
all at one time. I'm sure things had to start kind of chronologically and just, okay, this happened. This probably caused this. Okay, then this happened. This probably caused this, and just step by
Right.
step all the way through. But now, man, just living good, living free, blessed by God, man. My wife, the craziest thing about the whole thing is my wife has never held one thing against me. Obviously, we've had struggles and it wasn't easy.
Sure.
We had to put things in place, accountability, that type of stuff. But man, as she was spending time with God trying to mend her broken heart, he started showing her things about her life in areas where she was having pride about something or whatever. I'm like, dude, this is insane. God is crazy, man. Like, I'm the one that has done all this stuff, and she's spending time with God trying to get her heart healed, and he's showing her things that she can change in her life. And so we both really just took action, man. We just started hammering at it. And dude, today is like we were just married yesterday. It's nuts. It's awesome. We're
And
like
that's a
newlyweds all over
good
again.
relationship. That should be a Hallmark movie. If they want to make
What's that?
so that should be a Hallmark movie.
I don't know if much of my life could fit in a Hallmark movie, brother. But
Well, just the story of it, two people complimenting each other, working on each other, and then
that's
working on
it.
themselves for the relationship, keeping it at first like that love at first sight. Like you're always just like you really fall in love for the first time again.
Yeah.
You're just so grateful for that opportunity to have it, and then how hard you've worked to achieve it.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't
100%.
do anything, I mean, it would be horrible. But the fact that
Oh,
you took
100%.
action and accountability and took in the steps that you needed to take to honor your wife, I mean, that's just insane, man.
Yeah. Dude, it is. It's crazy. I don't even know how to explain it, man. I'm lucky, and I truly believe that God placed her. I believe she's the only person on earth that could do what she did for as many years as she did living with me. And it's not, I mean, I've always been in love with her. I love her. I always have. It was just I had these hangups and I really wasn't sure what was causing even the desire to step out, or it wasn't even emotional affairs. It was like a fix, you know it was like a drug fix, pretty much. I mean, that became my drug after all other vices were gone. And I had the pastor when we were going through counseling, he told me, he's like, Satan will be 100% happy to trade you one addiction for another as long as he can keep you in bondage.
Yeah.
And I've never, I mean, that's the most true statement I've ever heard. You can pass
Well,
him
yeah.
off one thing, but he'll hand you back another.
I just saw this today, and I've seen this before a handful of times, but Denzel Washington, who's one of my favorite actors, and he's obviously a very spiritual person too. He said this: if the devil is leaving you alone, you're probably not doing something right. Because the devil
100%.
only comes to mess with you when you're doing something right.
100%, man.
So, especially when
100%.
keep you in that bondage where you begin to self sabotage yourself and get really hard on yourself, and you kind of become your worst enemy. You become the enemy, really. So he doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah. And the
So
first thing he does when you doing something that goes along with shame is isolation. And that's why it's so easy to stay in that secret stuff, the stuff that's going on in your head that leads you to open up your computer and view porn or whatever. It's all a coping mechanism for something that you're missing in your life and you're just not filling it with Jesus. That's all it is, man. Now I just go to Jesus. That's what's so awesome about this hour. And everything else for me is, the physical part now, because I've been working out for 3 years with my family, isn't that big of a deal to work out 45 minutes a day. I'm already doing that anyway. I think we have to do 7,000 steps. It would have been a challenge for me a few months ago when I couldn't get out of bed. But
sure.
I mean, it was like instant healing right before this stuff started. Like just one day I didn't struggle with pain anymore. So I'm able to keep up with all that stuff.
You're talking about the nerves in the back, or just in the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Just something got out of whack, I guess. I'm not really sure, but it was a struggle for 8 or 9 months. It was not fun. But
Jeez.
dude, now just feeling set free, moving my body physically every day, just doing good things, connecting every day, and being intentional about all of it,
Yeah.
The crazy thing is too, I was on Twitter a long time ago. I had just gotten back on it, and it almost instantly connected with you, connected with Nate, now connected with Mike and all 20 guys that are in this challenge. So just building that community that I can lean on from now on, and what you guys are doing is so awesome.
And I thought you were one of the bravest people I've had come on, because you DM'd me, didn't have a profile, and all of a sudden I get this fun person who says, "Hey, I want to tell my story." I'm like, "Awesome!" And then all of a sudden, like I saw you send me a DM probably like maybe a day later or something like that. I'm like, okay, so I was really busy at work. I didn't have time to read it all. And then I did, like, I gotta bring this guy on. Like, I don't know his profile. I don't know what's going on here, but I gotta connect with this guy. Loved your story when we connected, and then just finding out so much more about you through this podcast. And to really wrap things up is like, what is one thing, a statement, a phrase, a word that you want to leave off with someone today to give them that light, that encouragement to start taking action in their life?
That's a good question, man. Don't do it alone. Don't do life alone. Do it with God. Do it with people. Do it with community. Find your people. That would have saved me years of just doing crappy stuff and being a crappy person, man. Hold yourself accountable, and hold yourself accountable to God first of all. But find a group, find a community to connect with. I never knew the value of that, because I always felt like, I'm just a lone soldier. I can do this. I'm a tough guy. I can handle it. But dude, nobody is a match against the enemy and his devices. And he took me out multiple times. So that's what I would say, brother.
Hey, I love it. And you know what? You're definitely a man of actions. All your socials will be in the description below. And we're going to do a special shout out to Nate Norman and Mike Schiff, because they helped you so much. So let's get them some followings. Let's get them some praise, because I know they've also had to work really hard on their own lives to now lead, and to be a leader, you have to go through this stuff. So you know what you're talking about, and then have that practice intentionality to be a man of action. So Kyle, welcome to the Man of Action squad.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Glad to be in it.
So remember, you guys too can take action. Just remember, like Kyle taught us today, start a little bit at a time. Don't go in alone. Find your tribe, find your community, and go out there with the best attitude, knowing that you can improve your life. You can be a man of action. So let's go. Check you guys out in the next video.